That morning I was late to a first-time job in one of the richest neighborhoods in town. Not normal rich either. Gates, stone walls, perfect sidewalks, the kind of place where one good client could lead to 6 more if you didn't screw it up. I had already imagined the worst by the time I got to the entrance. Me pulling in late, looking cheap, looking scattered. The client deciding I wasn't serious. Maybe calling the HOA office. Maybe telling a few neighbors not to bother with me. It sounds dramatic, but when your whole business is basically held together by gas receipts and panic, one bad first impression feels huge. I pulled over right before the gate, climbed out, and tightened the mower down with a spare ratchet strap I found under a pile of old bags and hedge clippings. My shirt was already sticking to my back and I hadn't even started working yet. By the time the guard waved me through, I felt defeated before I even saw the house. Then I turned onto her street. It was one of those places that didn't look real at first. Big white house, long curved driveway, clean landscaping, trimmed hedges, dark windows, a pool visible past the side yard. Everything looked quiet and expensive in a way that made my truck seem even louder when I pulled up. I parked, checked my shirt, wiped my hands on my shorts, grabbed my clipboard, and walked to the front door trying to look more put together than I was. She answered after one knock. Red hair, late 30s maybe, bare feet, light summer clothes like she had nowhere to be and no reason to rush for anyone. She looked calm in a way that instantly made me more aware of how not calm I was. "You're Jake," she said. I nodded. "Yeah, sorry, I'm a little behind this morning." She leaned lightly on the door frame and gave me the kind of small smile that somehow made the apology feel bigger instead of smaller. "I noticed," she said. "But you made it." There wasn't anything rude in the way she said it. If anything, she sounded amused. Not mean. Just very aware that I was standing there trying hard to act like I did this all day in places like hers. "I can still get everything done," I said. "I walked the property from the estimate photos, and I brought what I need." "I'm sure you did," she said, stepping out onto the porch. "Come on, I'll show you the back." That first walk through the yard should have been simple. She pointed out a few overgrown lines along the fence, some cleanup around the pool area, a flower bed that needed the edges redone. Normal stuff. Easy money, really. But she stayed close enough that I kept catching her perfume whenever the breeze shifted. And every time I looked up, she was already looking at me. Not in a weird way, in a deliberate way, like she liked watching me try not to be thrown off. I got to work fast because work was the only thing that made sense. Mow first, trim second, edges last. Keep moving. Keep your head down. Do not stare at the client. But Lauren kept coming outside. Once with her phone in hand, pretending to check something near the patio. Once to ask if I wanted the side gate left open for the landscaper she used to have. Once just to tell me I was doing a better job on the lines near the walkway than the last company did. Nobody talks like that unless they're paying close attention. At one point, I shut the mower off near the back terrace and heard her say, "You take your work seriously." I looked over. She was standing under the shade with a glass of iced tea, one hip against the railing, watching me. "I kind of have to," I said. "That's not the same thing." I didn't know what to do with that, so I just gave a small nod and got back to work. But the whole time after that, I could feel that sentence sitting in my chest. When I finished, I loaded my tools slower than usual, partly because I was tired and partly because I knew once I left, that was probably it unless she called again. Then she stepped down from the patio and said, "Before you go, can you look at one more thing?" It was a small patch near the pool where some planters had shifted and left dirt scattered across the stone. 5-minute job, maybe less. I handled it, brushed the area clean, and when I straightened up, she was holding out a cold bottle of water. "For the road," she said. I took it. "Thanks." Her eyes stayed on me a second longer than they needed to. "You were worth waiting for, Jake." I laughed a little because I didn't trust myself to say anything smarter than that. Then I got in my truck, shut the door, and sat there with the bottle still cold in my hand, staring through the windshield like an idiot. I needed her to call me again for the money. That was true. But by the time I pulled out of that driveway, I already knew that wasn't the only reason I wanted to see her name on my phone. Lauren called 3 days later while I was cleaning grass out of my trailer in a self-serve wash bay. I saw her name on my phone and just stood there with the hose running in my hand like I needed a second to make sure I wasn't making it up. "Hey," I said, trying to sound normal. "Hi, Jake. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." I looked down at the wet clumps around my boots. "Nothing I can't pause." She laughed softly. "Good. I wanted to see if you could come by tomorrow. The hedge line on the west side still looks uneven to me, and one of the sprinklers near the pool is acting up." The truth was, that hedge line had looked fine when I left, and sprinklers were not exactly my thing. But I told her I'd be there. The next afternoon was hot enough to make the air look bright and mean. By the time I got to her place, my shirt was already damp, and Lauren opened the side gate before I even made it to the front. "You can come through here," she said. "It's quicker." That was new. So was the way she said it, like I already belonged on that side of the house. I followed her through the side path, trying not to notice how quiet everything felt back there. Pool water moving. Patio furniture in the shade. Music playing low somewhere inside. It didn't feel like a client's place anymore. It felt private. I checked the sprinkler first. Turned out the head was clogged with dirt and needed a simple fix. She stood nearby, one hand around a glass full of ice, watching me crouch in the grass like I was doing something more impressive than cleaning out a stuck nozzle. "You always work this hard over tiny problems?" she asked. "Tiny problems turn into bigger ones when nobody handles them." She smiled at that. "That sounds like something you tell yourself about everything." I looked up at her. "Maybe it is." She held my eyes a second longer than she needed to, then glanced toward the hedge line. "Well, since you're here, you can prove it." That became the pattern. Every time I thought I was done, there was one more thing. A cleanup near the patio. A couple of planters she wanted shifted. Leaves skimmed from the pool deck even though there were barely any there. Nothing big on its own. Just enough to keep me around. And every visit felt a little less accidental. One afternoon she brought me a cold sports drink while I was trimming along the back fence. I shut the machine off and took it from her, and our fingers brushed for maybe half a second. Not enough to mean anything by itself. Enough that I felt it anyway. "You look overheated," she said. "I'm good." "You don't sound good." "I'm working." "That's not what I said." I twisted the cap off and drank half of it too fast just to have something to do. She was standing close enough that I could smell sunscreen and something lighter underneath it. Clean. Expensive. The kind of smell that made me more aware of the sweat on my own neck. "You get quiet around me," she said. I gave a short laugh. "You notice too much." "I know." She walked back toward the shade like she'd just said something harmless, and I stood there with the bottle in my hand feeling like she'd reached over and adjusted something inside my chest. A week after that, I was finishing a patio cleanup near sunset when she asked if I was in a rush. I looked at the sky. "Depends why." "I thought you might want a drink before you go." I should have left. I knew that even then. Instead, I washed my hands at the outdoor sink, tried to flatten my hair a little, and followed her up to the terrace. She handed me a glass of iced tea and sat across from me like this was normal now, like I came there after work all the time. We talked for almost 40 minutes. Not about grass. Not about billing. About where I grew up. About why I started the business. About how many jobs I needed each month just to stop feeling nervous all the time. I didn't even mean to be that honest. It just kept happening with her. She had a way of asking simple questions that made me answer like I'd known her longer than I had. "You act older than 24, she said. "That's not always a compliment." "It is when I say it." The sun had gone low enough to throw orange light across the pool. She tucked one leg under herself in the chair, and I had to keep reminding myself to look at her face. Then she said, "Come inside for a second." Just like that. No big pause. No dramatic tone. Just calm. Like she already knew I was going to follow her. I did. The house was cool and quiet. All stone floors and soft light and windows that made the backyard look even better from inside. She walked to the kitchen, set her glass down, then turned back toward me. For the first time since I'd met her, neither of us said anything right away. I remember hearing the hum of the fridge. I remember how hard I was trying not to move first. Then she stepped closer and said, "You really don't know what you do to a room when you walk into it? Do you?" My throat went dry. "Lauren." She put a hand lightly on my chest. Not pushing. Just there. "You can leave," she said. "Or you can stop pretending you haven't felt this building the same way I have." That was the moment the line disappeared. I kissed her before I could talk myself out of it, and once it started, everything I'd been trying to keep under control for weeks just gave out at once. Finally, the tension broke. Ever had a moment where you just couldn't hold back anymore? Let's talk in the comments. All that tension, all that effort, all that trying to act like I didn't notice her noticing me. It was suddenly real, and it hit me harder than I was ready for. By the time I left that night, it was fully dark outside. I sat in my truck with both hands on the wheel, staring at her front door after it closed, trying to breathe like a normal person. I should have felt lucky. I should have felt shocked. Mostly I felt gone, because it wasn't just that I'd finally crossed that line with her. It was the way she had looked at me after, like I wasn't some passing mistake, not some kid she'd pulled into the house for one reckless hour. She looked at me like she had chosen me. And once I felt that, I was in deeper than I wanted to admit. After that night, Lauren didn't act awkward about it for even 1 second. That was probably what got me the most. I'd gone home expecting at least some kind of distance the next time she called. Maybe a cooler tone. Maybe that careful voice people use when they want to pretend something didn't matter as much in daylight. Instead, she called me the very next afternoon and asked if I could stop by Friday because 2 of her neighbors wanted estimates. Just like that. I was standing in line at a gas station when she said it, and I actually stepped out of line to hear her better. "Neighbors?" I asked. "MHM. I mentioned you." I leaned against the side of the building, trying not to sound too eager. "You did. You do good work, Jake. I'm not keeping that to myself." That one sentence stayed with me all week. By Friday, I had 3 estimates in her neighborhood. By the next week, 2 of them turned into steady work. Nice houses too. Clean properties. Good budgets. Clients who cared more about reliability than squeezing me over every dollar. For the first time since I started the business, I felt like I was getting pulled upward instead of dragged along the ground. And Lauren was tied to all of it. I'd show up in the neighborhood to mow one house, then another, then end the afternoon at hers. Sometimes I really was there to work. Sometimes I was there because she texted me and said she was home alone and wanted to see me before dinner. Sometimes it was both. That was the part that started changing me. I wasn't just sneaking around with a rich older woman who still made my head spin every time she opened the door. I was building a routine around her. I knew where she kept the good glasses in the kitchen. I knew which patio chair she liked at sunset. I knew that when she wanted company and didn't feel like saying it directly, she'd ask if I had time for one quick thing before I headed out. One afternoon, I finished trimming her back fence line, rinsed off at the outdoor sink, and walked into the kitchen through the side door she'd left unlocked for me. She was at the island in a loose white top, cutting fruit like she hadn't spent the last hour texting me things that made it hard to focus on straight lines. "You're late," she said without looking up. "I was working." Her mouth curved a little. "So was I." That kind of thing used to throw me completely. By then it just hit me right in the chest and kept going. We ended up sitting in her kitchen eating cold fruit and talking while my shirt dried on me. Not rushed, not nervous, just talking. She asked how many weekly clients I had now. I told her. She asked what I'd need to stop using the old mower before it died in public and took my dignity with it. I told her that too. "You need another crew setup," she said. "I need about 10 things. You think too small when it comes to yourself." I laughed once. Easy to say from this kitchen. She didn't smile at that. She just held my eyes. "That's exactly why I'm saying it." Later that same week, I hired a part-time helper named Luis for 2 long days because I finally had enough work stacked together that I couldn't cover it all alone without running myself into the ground. The first morning he climbed into my truck and looked at the schedule. He whistled low. "Man, where'd all this come from?" I thought about Lauren for half a second before answering. "Couple good referrals." That was technically true, but it felt smaller every time I said it out loud. Because it wasn't just referrals. It was the way clients in her circle looked at me once they knew I worked for her. It was the way she'd mention my name like she was sure I belonged there. It was the way I started carrying myself differently because somewhere along the line, I stopped feeling like I was just trying to survive the week. And privately, things with her got deeper too. Not wilder. Not messier. Just closer. I'd end up at her place after a long day, sore and dirty and tired. And somehow the best part wasn't even always the rush of getting pulled inside. Sometimes it was afterward, when the house went quiet and we'd sit in her kitchen with the back doors open, talking about stupid little things and serious things like they belonged in the same conversation. Failure, money, pride, the kind of men I grew up around, the kind of life I thought I was supposed to settle for. She listened in a way most people don't. Then one evening, while I was going over next week's jobs on my phone at her counter, she said, "How much would it take?" I looked up. "For what?" "For you to stop operating like every day is an emergency." I gave a short laugh. "That's a big number." "I'm serious." "So am I." She crossed one arm over herself, studying me. "New mower, better trailer, maybe another trimmer setup. What would it take to make this feel real to you?" "It is real." "You know what I mean." I did. That was the problem. I set my phone down. "Lauren, I'm not asking you for money." "I didn't say you were." "I don't want this turning into something weird." Her expression changed a little then. Not angry, just steadier. "Jake, look at me." I did. "I'm not offering because I pity you," she said. "And I'm not trying to buy you. I'm offering because you're working too hard with equipment that's holding you back, and I'm tired of watching you act like wanting more is some kind of flaw." I didn't say anything. My pride was already pushing back. But the truth was worse than that. The truth was that by then, everything in my life felt connected to her. The work, the money, the confidence, the part of me that had started believing I might actually build something. She stepped closer and rested a hand against my chest. "We can call it a loan," she said quietly. "An investment. Paper it however you want. But stop pretending I'm not already in this with you." That landed harder than I was ready for, because standing there in her kitchen, looking at her, I realized the real risk wasn't the money. It was how much I wanted to believe her. For 2 days after that talk in Lauren's kitchen, I kept finding reasons not to answer the question. Not her question. Mine. Could I actually let somebody help me like that and still feel like I'd built this thing myself? I worked through it the only way I knew how. I filled the schedule. I loaded the trailer before sunrise. I knocked out 3 properties in one day with Luis and still ended the afternoon sore, irritated, and one breakdown away from losing my mind because the old mower stalled twice and the trailer light finally quit for good. By the time I pulled into Lauren's driveway that evening, I was in a bad mood and trying not to show it. She took one look at me and said, "So that answer's going well." I dropped my keys on the counter and gave a tired laugh. "You can tell? You have your jaw locked." "That's because I'm trying not to say something stupid." She poured me a glass of water and leaned against the island. "Then don't. Just tell me what's actually bothering you." I drank half of it first. Then I told her the truth. That I didn't want to feel managed. That I didn't want people thinking I got somewhere because a rich woman decided to make a few calls and fix my life. That I'd worked too hard to lose whatever pride I had left. She listened without interrupting. That was one of the things she did best. She never rushed to fill silence just because it got heavy. When I finished, she said, "Then don't make it charity." I looked at her. "Make it clean," she said. "On paper. A loan. Terms you choose. Monthly repayment once the new accounts settle in. You keep your pride, and I get to stop watching you drag old equipment through good opportunities." I laughed once through my nose. "You make it sound simple." "It is simple. You're the one making it emotional." "That easy for you to say." "No," she said quietly. "It isn't." That got my attention. She stepped closer, rested her hand on my arm, and for once there was no teasing in her face at all. "Jake, I know exactly what it means to need somebody to believe in you before your life looks impressive on paper. I'm not offering this because I think you're weak. I'm offering it because I think you're ready. That hit harder than anything else she could have said. Ready. Not lucky. Not rescued. Ready. So that was how I said yes. Not all at once. Not dramatically. We sat at her kitchen counter and worked it through like two people who meant what they were saying. Amount. Repayment. What I needed first. What could wait. I told her I wanted it clean enough that I could look at myself afterward and know I hadn't folded. She told me good, because that was one of the reasons she wanted to help me in the first place. A week later, I had a better mower. 2 weeks after that, I had a decent trailer, my own this time, lights working, no borrowed favors attached to it. I picked up 2 more weekly houses in her neighborhood and 1 commercial account from a guy whose wife had heard my name at Lauren's place over drinks. Everything started moving faster after that. Not magically. I still got tired. I still had long days. I still had to keep the numbers straight and make sure the work matched the promise. But the panic I'd been carrying around for so long finally started loosening its grip. I wasn't waking up every morning feeling hunted anymore. Luis started picking up more days with me. Clients paid on time. The schedule filled out far enough ahead that I stopped checking my phone every 10 minutes hoping something new would come in. Even stupid little things changed. I bought better work shirts. Replaced broken tools before they became disasters. Stood straighter when I walked up to new houses. I noticed it one afternoon when I caught my reflection in the side of the truck. I didn't look rich. Didn't look polished. Didn't look like I belonged in a country club ad. I just didn't look scared anymore. That night I ended up at Lauren's place after a long Saturday. The last light was still hanging over the pool, soft and gold. And she was out on the terrace with 2 drinks already poured like she'd known I was coming even though I hadn't said for sure. "You're late," she said. "You keep saying that like I'm supposed to feel bad. It keeps getting you here." I took the glass from her and sat beside her. For a minute we just looked out over the water. No rush, no performance. My hands were still rough from the day, and I could feel the tiredness in my shoulders, but it wasn't the same kind of tired I used to carry. This one had something solid under it. She glanced over at me. "You look different. Better or worse? Like you finally believe your own life." I smiled at that, then looked back toward the yard. Her yard. The first one that had led to the next and the next and the next. "You know what's weird?" I said. "What?" "The first day I came here, I thought if I messed up your place I was done. Like that was it. End of the road. And now," I turned toward her. "Now I know this place was the road." She smiled slowly, the kind that made everything in me go quiet for a second. Because that was the thing I understood now. She had started as the woman who got under my skin the second she opened the door. The one who pulled me into a life that looked cleaner, easier, bigger than anything I was standing in. But somewhere along the way that stopped being the whole story. She wasn't just the reason I wanted more. She was the first person who looked at me like I could actually reach it. She set her glass down and moved closer, her hand sliding into mine like it had belonged there longer than either of us had said out loud. And sitting there beside her, with the schedule full, the business finally breathing, and my whole future no longer feeling like a bad joke, I knew exactly where the turn had happened. It started the day she opened that door. But it became real when she decided not just to want me. When she decided to bet on me too.